The air in the Buckingham Palace state dining room was thick with the scent of lilies and the heavier, less pleasant aroma of institutional pretense. It was June 1996. The divorce was looming, a constitutional thundercloud visible on the horizon, yet Charles and Diana were performing their final excruciating act of unity, a mandatory private anniversary dinner decreed by the Queen herself for the preservation of appearances during this difficult transition. Diana, cloaked in an elegant icy blue gown, felt less like a princess and more like a theatrical prop in a Greek tragedy. Every strained smile, every courteous nod to the long-serving footman, was a lie. Her real self, the woman consumed by fury and betrayal, was hidden, coiled like a snake beneath the table, ready to strike not with venom, but with devastating truth. The oppressive quiet of the vast room seemed to amplify the churning chaos within her, a silent scream trapped behind a forced royal composure that was rapidly nearing its breaking point. The dinner was a blur of silver service and suffocating silence. Charles, across the massive mahogany table, spoke only when absolutely necessary, his gaze perpetually fixed on some distant higher purpose, presumably the clock ticking toward his freedom. He managed a single, perfunctory comment about the appalling state of the Highgrove Gardens, and a brief query about a distant cousin's health, ensuring the exchange remained strictly transactional and impersonal. Diana barely touched the pheasant, the fine French wine tasting like ash on her tongue, her appetite long lost to stress. How many more of these performance dinners must I endure? She questioned silently, the thought echoing the despair of her younger self. Her hand, however, rested protectively on the small folded photograph tucked into the deep pocket of her gown. It was a picture of a necklace, a piece Camilla had worn just days earlier, a gift Diana knew Charles claimed was purchased for the Queen. A small, insignificant betrayal, perhaps, but one she could prove. This wasn't about the necklace, it was about the final, shattering truth she needed from him, a validation of the poison she had lived with for 15 years. She needed him to admit the cruelty, not just the infidelity. The moment the last footman cleared the table and the heavy oak doors closed, locking them in alone amidst the glittering crystal and fading flowers, the atmosphere snapped. The illusion dissolved into a toxic void. Charles immediately rose, loosening his tie, a clear sign the performance was over. "Well, that was mercifully brief," he murmured, moving towards the French doors overlooking the darkened gardens, his body language communicating absolute disinterest in her continued presence. "He doesn't even see me," Diana thought, a dull ache starting behind her eyes. "I am furniture to him." Diana didn't move. She waited, heart pounding a heavy rhythm against her ribs, gathering her courage for the final act. Her voice, when it came, was dangerously low, cutting through the silence like broken glass. "Sit down, Charles. We aren't finished. I demand 5 minutes of honesty from the father of my children. That is the least I deserve after all these years of service to your family." He paused, a flicker of profound annoyance crossing his face, his blue eyes sharp with sudden malice. He despised demands, especially from her, viewing them as further evidence of her unstable nature. "Yes, we are, Diana. The divorce papers are drawn. The settlement is agreed. We have nothing left to discuss but the scheduling of the future press statements. I suggest you consult your solicitor. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have pressing documents in my study. Let us behave like civilized members of the royal house and conclude this farce with dignity." "It's not about the money or the statements," Diana said, rising slowly, her elegance masking a volcano of rage. Her blue gown caught the light, transforming her into a lethal, beautiful weapon. She crossed the vast room, the soft thud of her heels sounding like distant cannon fire, each step a testament to her 20 years of endured pain. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough for him to smell the faint scent of gardenia she still wore, close enough to see the total lack of warmth in his eyes. "It's about the lies. It's about honesty. Just once, Charles, before we both walk away, I need the truth from you. I need to know why you allowed this systemic cruelty." She withdrew the photograph from her pocket, her hand surprisingly steady, and placed it on the small writing desk between them. It was a close-up of Camilla wearing the sapphire and diamond cluster. "This was bought for the Queen, wasn't it?" "That's what you told the accountants. But Camilla wore it at the polo match. A small, pathetic lie. But it's a window, Charles. It shows me the scale of the deceit you've maintained. Tell me why you felt the need to lie about something so trivial when the entire world knew the main truth." Charles glanced at the picture, a fleeting, bored look of recognition. He didn't even bother to deny it. The energy to maintain the lie had finally evaporated. He sighed dramatically, adjusting his cufflinks, his patience clearly exhausted. The true dramatic hook began here, replacing denial with brutal, cold clarity. "You're absolutely right," Charles said, his voice level, devoid of all emotion, a far more terrifying sound than anger. He didn't raise his voice, he simply spoke the truth. He'd held back for 15 years, a truth he now saw as a necessary clarification to ensure her future silence. You've tracked the jewel, you've tracked the phone calls, you've tracked the flights. Fine. You want honesty, Diana? You shall have it. Are you truly prepared for the consequences of that honesty, though? Because the truth is rarely as romantic as your self-pitying stories. He took a slow, deliberate step back, putting distance between them, putting himself on the high ground, a psychological defense mechanism. You're right about everything. I never loved you. I never wanted to marry you. Not for one single, solitary moment. I did it because it was my duty to secure the line of succession with an acceptable bride, and you, unfortunately, were the most suitable vessel at the time. I was in love with Camilla then, and I am in love with her now. Our marriage was merely a necessary transaction that has run its course. The air left Diana's lungs in a silent, violent gasp. She felt a profound physical shock, a sense of total systemic failure. All the years, all the fights, all the hopes she had desperately clung to, that perhaps he had loved her, even briefly in the beginning, shattered into a million sharp pieces. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk so tightly her knuckles were white. A vessel. I was nothing but a breeding vessel for the crown, disposable once my duty was done. She thought, the devastation total. She struggled to process the casual cruelty, the dismissal of 15 years of her life. All she could do was stare at the man who had been her husband, her prince, the father of her sons, as he stood there, free of the burden of the lie. The words echoed in the deafening silence. Never wanted to marry you. It wasn't just a divorce. It was an annulment of her reality, a profound public humiliation delivered in private. Charles watched her reaction with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment, a flicker of cold satisfaction in his eyes. He saw the crack in her carefully constructed composure, the deep, silent wound his words had inflicted, and instead of pity, he saw opportunity. He knew exactly where her remaining defenses lay, her sons. He moved in for the tactical kill, shifting the focus from his infidelity and cruelty to her perceived weakness, the only thing that truly mattered to her, her sons. You look shocked, Charles continued, an icy precision returning to his voice, amplified by the success of his blow. But you'll survive. You're strong enough to survive the truth, Diana. But you need to understand something important about the future arrangement. We will not have you destabilizing the future of the crown with your erratic, media-driven behavior. Your emotional dramatics are over. He leaned forward, his gaze locking with hers, a predatory chill in his eyes. I will make sure everyone knows, Diana, that you are too unstable, too erratic, too emotionally delicate and volatile to be a proper, consistent mother to the future King of England. That is the narrative we will deploy. We have the full weight of the Crown's medical and legal teams ready. We will ensure the courts, the advisors, and ultimately the public understand that you, not I, pose the greatest danger to William and Harry's stability. We have been preparing for your inevitable public breakdown for years. The threat wasn't a warning. It was a promise of psychological warfare, leveraging her greatest vulnerability. This was the true moment of ultimate betrayal, far exceeding the affair. Diana had lived under the label of mad and paranoid for years, but now that label was being weaponized, aiming directly for her custody rights and her influence over her sons. All the years of gaslighting suddenly coalesced into this single, terrifying threat. Diana's mind flashed through every doctor's visit, every whispered conversation with a therapist, realizing the confidential details were now loaded guns pointed at her head. Diana finally found her voice, but it was a raw, unrecognizable whisper, laced with disbelief and mounting fury. You wouldn't dare. You are threatening to use my illness, my pain against me, my bulimia, my depression, against my right to be with my sons. They are my children, Charles. They need me. You know they do. They trust me more than anyone in this house, including you. They need stability and duty, Charles corrected, his voice hardening, devoid of any paternal warmth. They need a clear, unshakable path to their destiny, Diana, not emotional chaos. Your public outbursts are deemed a destabilizing influence. The doctor's reports from your episodes are quite clear. We have them all, Diana. Every detail you shared in confidence with those you thought were friends and healers. You gave us the ammunition yourself. He was referring to her past battles with bulimia and self-harm, medical history she had trusted the palace to keep confidential. This was a declaration. Her pain would be used as the weapon against her motherhood. The betrayal of that intimate trust was a physical, dizzying pain that brought bile to her throat. We have the documentation. We have the signed affidavits from staff witnessing your erratic behavior. If you push for any terms outside the agreement, that documentation becomes public and we petition the court for full parental control. Do you understand? Your instability will be used to limit your access to the boys permanently, reducing you to supervised infrequent visits. It is your final warning. Diana felt a surge of white-hot rage, a fury so intense it eclipsed the heartbreak and the humiliation. She wasn't just fighting a marriage anymore. She was fighting for the right to remain a parent. She knew in that instant that Charles meant every word. He would use the full force of the firm, the courtiers, the doctors, the lawyers, the press, to paint her as the mad woman of the palace and slowly erase her influence from her sons' lives. This was the final, inescapable cage designed to keep her away from her children. She spun away from him, stumbling slightly, her mind racing, processing the terrifying scope of the threat. The dinner, the dress, the palace, all of it felt suffocating, closing in on her. She rushed down the hallway, her blue gown flying behind her, the image of Charles's cold, triumphant face, the face of a man finally free and finally dangerous, etched into her memory. She didn't go to her room to weep. She went to her desk to plan her war. That night, Diana didn't sleep. The shock had long worn off, replaced by a crystalline focus, a fierce maternal resolve. She sat at her small desk, her hand trembling slightly as she retrieved the tiny voice recorder she kept hidden, a secret tool of a spy in her own home. I have to record everything, she thought desperately, her eyes burning with resolve. Every threat, every word. He's made it clear I can't trust the narrative they create. I need undeniable proof of his threats against my capacity as a mother. They won't just destroy me, they will rewrite history to do it. I need a confession, not just an admission. She began meticulously reviewing her diaries, marking every date where a threat about her mental health or her capacity as a mother had been made by Charles or his staff. This threat, "You're too unstable to be a proper mother," was the catalyst for her war on the palace's carefully constructed narrative. It was the moment she stopped being merely a victim and became a calculated warrior, arming herself for the battle to come. She immediately contacted her most trusted allies outside the palace system, journalists she knew would never betray her, lawyers disconnected from the crown, and her own private security detail. She began the slow, arduous process of building her defense, knowing the attack would be relentless and brutal. She started collecting audio recordings of all her conversations just in case. She knew she couldn't simply rely on the divorce courts. The firm was too powerful, too embedded in the very fabric of the legal system. She needed a platform, a direct line to the people to dismantle the unstable mother narrative before Charles could fully deploy it. She needed a public statement so massive, so disruptive, that the palace would be forced to retreat and drop the custody threat. That single cruel sentence, that threat to her sons, sealed her decision. She needed to tell her side of the story, not just about infidelity, but about the psychological abuse used to remove her from her sons' lives. This was the moment the seeds of the Panorama interview, the ultimate act of royal rebellion, the speaking out that would change everything, were definitively planted. She was preparing for war. Her confrontation with Charles had not brought her the solace of truth. It had brought her the terrible clarity of her position. She was alone, fighting a machine that would use her own emotional struggles as evidence of her unfitness. But Diana was no longer the fragile, naive bride. She was the mother of the future king, and no one, not even the heir to the throne, was going to take her children away based on a malicious, self-serving lie. She would fight Charles's threat with her truth. Her stability was not negotiable. I will not be the mad mother you paint me to be, she whispered to the empty room, her voice finally strong and steady, filled with unbreakable maternal resolve. I will be the voice that exposes your lies and your cruelty. You will not take my boys. You have underestimated me one last time. The war had just begun, and the ultimate battlefield was the custody and loyalty of her sons. A fight she was now prepared to win, no matter the cost to her own reputation or safety. A fight that would send shockwaves across the world.